So in this video, we're going to double down on pattern modes and pattern arrangement. And to start off with, I've loaded this kit here by Martin Roth called the New Style Kit. And the neat thing about this kit is how many patterns are programmed to it. And it also sounds really good. So I'm going to come out of the browse mode now, and I'm going to go into pattern mode. And notice that I've got pattern mode pinned to the screen here, so I don't have to keep holding the button down. Now you can see immediately here all these patterns are laid out on the screen. And each pattern is assigned to a pad, which makes for great live playing. So you can use these pads to launch the pattern on the fly. And you can do this in real time without any glitches. So this is a really cool way to get ideas about how to arrange your song. And while I was selecting these patterns, they were automatically filling up the scene. And so you can see here that the last pattern I chose, pattern 12, has been assigned to the scene. So if we wanted to leave that pattern there and move on to the next scene, we'd have to create a new scene. So we're going to take a look at how to do that a little bit later on. So related to that are the controls on the top left screen here. You can see we can actually remove this pattern from the scene altogether if we hit remove. But notice that doesn't actually affect the patterns themselves, they're still there just fine. But that's left us with a blank scene, which we can fill with any pattern we choose. So the changes you make in this way are non-destructive. You can play around with the arrangement as much as you want until you're settled on something. Now next to the remove function is the double function, and as you can see that doubles the length of our pattern there. And notice how the scene resizes according to the pattern as well. The scene length will always accommodate the longest pattern in the scene. Now resizing the pattern isn't destructive either. You can see all those unused events are still there, and all we've really done is change the loop point. Now it's important to remember what a scene is. Think of it more as a section of your song. Right now we've only got one track or one kit loaded in here, but it could be comprised of many tracks. And as I said earlier in the tutorial, it might be easier if we rename this to something more conventional like intro. Just to give you an idea of the way you can use scenes to actually create songs. And so what we'll do is we'll place the first pattern here as our intro. So this can now serve as the beginning of our track, and we can develop this by adding in scenes and then putting new patterns in those scenes. So to add in a scene here, we're just going to click on this plus at the end of the last scene. And now all I need to do is hit a pad, and the pattern assigned to that pad will now be put in that scene. And then I can just repeat the process for scene 3. And if you've ever used song mode on some old hardware sequencers, you're probably quite familiar with this already. And it's also not too dissimilar from the way things are done in Ableton Live. So I'm going to give this a more descriptive name. And it really is a good idea to name your scenes as you create them. I'm just going to add one more scene here. And I think we've got enough there to start with. So now if I played through this track from the beginning, it would go through these patterns sequentially as it goes from scene to scene. Okay, so let's move on now to a couple of other functions. You can see at the top here we have insert and delete. We can also create or insert an empty pattern just by pushing on an empty pad. Now if we use insert, that'll populate the next empty slot with a new pattern. Or if we want to, we can go over to the next page here where it's empty and insert a pattern here. And of course, we can also delete patterns from here as well. Okay, so notice down here the duplicate light is lit up here, and that's because we have a special duplicate function while we're in the pattern mode. And as you can imagine, that function is to duplicate a pattern from one pad to another. So let's say I want to copy the pattern in pad 14 here. So of course I push the pad and it's armed, starts flashing, and I can now overwrite any of these other pads if I want to, or I can copy it to a blank pad so that I don't actually have to override anything. And there are more slots on the next page if I need them too. Now a pretty cool way to use this is, let me just for example get rid of all these patterns here and say we're starting from scratch. So imagine we've just started a project and this is our first pattern here. Well, once you've got the basis of your first pattern, you can duplicate it very quickly and easily to the next pad. Then you can make some modifications. So maybe you want to add some hats or a clap or something. Well, then you can duplicate that pattern to the next pad. Add something again, and then duplicate it again. And this way you can continuously build your track by adding in new elements, changing things up, modifying the events, and then continuously building upon that. Okay, so I'm just going to undo that now and just take this back to where we were when I first loaded up the kit. And we're going to go now into the scene mode. Now, scene mode is quite similar to pattern mode. You can see you've got the different scenes spread out on the pads here, and you can just select them with the pads. It's very easy to insert a new scene just by clicking on Insert here. And once you've got that scene highlighted, you can go into your pattern mode and then select the pattern that you want to insert into that scene. So it's a very quick, fast way to build up your scenes with the hardware interface. So again, we just insert, go to the pattern mode, and select the pattern we want to put into that new scene. So it's really straightforward. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this basic overview of the pattern and scene modes. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.